Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and welcome back to the Advent build. This is episode 5 and I have to say probably the penultimate episode actually, because I'm simply running out of time to fit many more updates in before the model actually has to be finished and revealed. So today's beverage is squash. It is not Coors Light, nor am I a fan of Coors Light. I don't actually like beer at all, frankly. But I do like this glass, and I've had it for a very long time, and this is what I drink my cold drinks in. So this is squash. In the UK we just call it squash. I'm not convinced this really exists in America, but I think another name for it is potentially cordial. So it's a concentrated sort of fruit flavoured juice, and you just add water to it. This is Vimto for those of us in the UK that know these things, and that is what I drink. So today's snack is less of a snack and more a mighty behemoth of a thing, and something that it's there all year round, but it's like the thing where you never notice just how many white golfs there are until you own one. You just seem to notice these more around Christmas. And I am of course talking about Toblerone. And this isn't the biggest Toblerone ever. I think this is the standard big size. This is 340 grams. I think I've seen bigger. Tee-hee. But it's quite a chunk of a thing. And I've not had this one before. So I picked this one up a couple of weeks ago actually, because what I do at sort of leading into December with this series in mind is I sort of scan around and I look for potential foodstuffs to feature, and I try to build things up because my release schedule is really that a video comes out when it's ready, so it's really difficult to plan for properly. So I kind of have things sat there. And I know I did feature Toblerones last year, but I featured the tiny ones, didn't I, last time? The little selection bag which had the black, the white and the standard. Anyway, I digress. I picked this one up without really taking any notice of what it was, and I sort of, in my mind, kind of glanced across this and thought I was picking up a white one. And I was even thinking about excuses that I could say for featuring a white one, because I featured the white Toblerone last year. But I like white Toblerones, so you know, I like to buy snacks that I like. Anyway, it's not white, is it? You can see that. It's actually golden caramel. So this is a Toblerone I have yet to try. I've got a strong feeling I know roughly what it's going to be like, and I'm quite excited for it, because if it is like the snack I'm thinking of, it's going to be a firm favourite with me. Anyway, this is as I say, 340 gram bar, quite large. And I was looking at this in the kitchen thinking, looking at the blurb, it's in the blurb panel. Made by Mondelez or Mondelez International, so pseudo-Swiss. Is it actually made in Switzerland? Let me find it. Does it say? Yes, it is. It's not pseudo-Swiss, it is Swiss, made in Switzerland. Fantastic. Okay, this is Swiss chocolate, everyone. Does it contain cocoa? Cocoa butter? Most British chocolate no longer contains that, or very little of it. Whey powder. Butter. Or butter flavouring. No cocoa. Anyway, I wondered with this monstrous snack what a portion might be. Those of us again in the UK with all the obesity taxes that are becoming more and more prevalent, portion size is starting to become a thing, and now all of the snacks have a portion size written on them. A portion of Quality Street, according to the makers, is 3. 3 Quality Streets as a portion in no one's world. Anyway, the answer is 1. one piece, one triangle, as you can see there, equals a portion. Right, again, said no whatever. Let's have a look at it. It's got a zippity doodah along the end here. And out it comes on. I mean, I don't think anyone ever gets the whole thing out, do they? And it's in foil. It's wondrous. And we'll open up the end. Stop trying to be nice about it. There we go. And this is what you get in there. Great chocolate pyramids. So I'll just get one. They do have the Toblerone in this size especially does seem to have enhanced structural strength compared to other chocolates, and as such it's not the easiest thing to get a triangle of. It's one of the reasons I like the small ones, because you don't have to. And here it is, the golden caramel version. It's blonde. It's got the sort of nougat pieces in it, almond honey and almond nougat chunks in there. There's one. Oh my. That is pretty much exactly what I was thinking it would be. If you've ever had a white Toblerone, it's definitely more than a slight taste that's the same as that. But the rest of it, and I'll apologise to everyone that isn't in the UK, but there used to be a chocolate bar back in the day called Caramac, which was a sort of a golden coloured non-chocolate chocolate bar type thing, and I loved Caramacs, always did. You don't think you can get them anymore. This is like Caramac with some crunchy almondy bits in it. This is a winner. And as much as I said one triangle, that's not much. As you can, if you look at this is really actually a pretty fair hunk of it's a pretty fair hunk of chocolate actually, and I think one triangle at a time will be enough for me. That's absolutely delicious. That's gone straight to the top of the Toblerone chart for me. So there you go. This penultimate sweet treat, the Toblerone, not necessarily a Christmas treat, but very much used as one in this country. Swiss chocolate Toblerone, absolutely lovely stuff. And this particular one wasn't even expensive because they're on offer at the moment. Highly recommended. Back to the model then, and you may recall where we left it last time. I have to move the yellow demarcation up the fuselage side, and you may also recall that I said that was going to be a bit of a pain. And here we are now. So I carefully masked the model, then I sanded, flatted down the old demarcation line, because otherwise there would be a visible line in this paint finish now from the difference in level. The difference in level isn't very big, don't get me wrong, but you would still be able to see it. Then the demarcation was remasked again once that was done, and I have sprayed more of this pink surfacer, Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 pink. I've obliterated the wording with my overspill there, but that's what this is. And it took multiple coats of that surfacer to get rid of that visible darkness from the old demarcation, and in fact it's still very vaguely visible. And you might be wondering why on earth I've demasked it, because I clearly haven't yet painted it yellow. And the answer is very simply that I want to just knock this edge back again. So I didn't want to spray the yellow and then demask it and have a pink edge to my yellow. It wasn't a huge risk, but I didn't want any risk. And also, the very nature of paints like the Surfacer, as good as Mr. Surfacer is, there's a little bit of a grainy finish around the wing root just from inevitable sort of overspray type stuff, because I've not thickly sprayed the whole area. I've pretty much just sprayed along where the colour needed to be covered. So I get my Trizac, bit of water, and just very, very gently, minimally, scuff across this masked edge. I'll remove any little sort of bits. You always get little bits, don't you? It'll remove those, it'll smooth it all off a little bit, blend it a little bit, and then when I remask it, I can ensure there is just the tiniest little gap between the pink and the camo, so that the yellow isn't going to be displaying a nice pink edge to it when it goes on. And this was a pain, there's no two ways about it. It's my own fault, rushing. This is what happens when we rush. But it also happens just because it happens, to be fair. We've all done it. Put a marking in the wrong place. Put my hurricane roundel in the wrong place on the wing, didn't I? Put a star and bar on upside down, you know, stencil on back to front. It happens. There's no point being fed up or annoyed about it. But it seems to me that it's sort of 8,000% more likely to happen when you're in a rush, isn't it? Not just because you're rushing, but because you don't have the time to fix it. So with that in mind, it's even more surprising actually that I've gone to the effort to demask it, to refine this masking before I carry on. But the fact of the matter is, if I didn't do this, carried on spraying it, put my yellow on, and then found that I had a pink edge on my yellow paint and all this nasty paint finish because I hadn't, I'd just be annoyed with myself. Long story short, I'd just be annoyed with myself, annoyed with the model, and it takes a lot of the pleasure away for me. So I'm risking not getting finished by the deadline. I'm risking the video content not being as good, but ultimately I make models because I like making them, and that has to remain the focus, doesn't it? It is still my hobby. So, and that's all it took, 2 minutes. But if I had done that with the masking in place, it wouldn't have cleaned up the edge properly, and it would have actually just messed up the edge of the tape a little bit, which would have then made the potential for that edge to be bad even more. So there we go. I'll check with my scientist glasses on, but that looks okay now. And I'm going to remask the fuselage again. Top tips for masking things like this. I use Tamiya tape, but if you cut a strip long enough to mask the entirety of the line you're doing, it's better to not have it in sections. Cut it in half and use the cut edge for your masking line, because that cut edge will be sharper than the edge of the tape as it comes. And make sure there aren't any gaps for overspray to get into. Basically, I did mask the whole thing. You can see that the entirety of the wings are covered. The pink overspray only goes to here, so I didn't need to completely cover the wings, really. But yeah, that's better. It really is just as simple as, if the whole thing's covered, you can't really have any problems, basically. Okay. And as you can see down here, there were other things that needed to be painted yellow still. So I've thrown stones at all of the birds, and I'll get all of the yellow bits painted up now. And because I'm using lacquer paints, the drying times aren't too bad, but what I can do is I can apply national markings and stencils using the mask set to the upper wing and the tail while this is all drying. There we go. So the other parts are the tail skid area, or it's basically really just the fin post that needs to be yellow, the wheels. So this is all the wheels you get with the CMK set. There's these two here are the inside of the wheel, so there's a covered and uncovered version, and these three are the outside of the wheel. So we've got an uncovered wheel, a de Havilland logo hubcap, and a smooth hubcap. So I'm using the smooth because that's what I see in the photo, but you get all those 3 different choices with the set, which is actually really nice. Then we've got the main undercarriage legs themselves, then the undercarriage braces, the tailplane strut braces, and more undercarriage braces. So those are all going to get yellowed in a few minutes once I've remasked this model, and I'll come back and show you it when it's yellow again. Here we go then, back into yellow, back how we should be, nice and dry and ready to go. And thanks to that little bit of extra effort, no nasty big step at the demarcation. It's all neat and tidy, no pink edges. Happy with that. I'm a bit annoyed at the time I had to spend doing it, but the result is good, so now we can crack on. And I'm going to start applying markings using this delightful one-man army set. And I'll warn you guys, because you are going to see this first, that I am going to multi-use or dual-wield a lot of this footage, because I'm going to do a one-man army masking use video that's a standalone video, but I will use a lot of footage from this episode. So if you later watch that as well, be warned, you're going to see some of this twice. So we'll start with the upper wing roundels. Here is set upper wing. And first off I need to make a transfer tape piece, because I want to move the whole thing. I'm going to paint the roundel over the top of the camo, so what I actually need to be on the model is this outline, the square. But in order to apply that without ruining the circle, effectively, I actually need the circles as well. So transfer tape is what we need. I have some tape here. This is kip tape. This is similar to Tamiya tape. It's a bit heavier duty. So I need to cut a piece of kip that's big enough to cover the whole thing. Stick it down on top, and then I need another little piece across there just to hold everything together. Cutting with scissors just so that everything is neat. There we go. So I've taped across the whole thing, and that's going to hold everything together. Now I need to mark out the model in some way so that I know where to put it, and that's really, to be honest, probably the hardest part to get right when you're using masks. Is the hardest part of it is positioning them. So I've got the kit instructions in front of me, just out of shot, but they're just in front of me here. And I'm looking at the wing ribs and looking at the position of the roundels relative to those ribs, and seeing if there's any way that I can kind of mark the kit up really to give me an idea of where to put this roundel. So the outside edge of the roundel just really falls between these outer 2 ribs, so I'm going to use another piece of tape. And I'm unilaterally deciding that that's where the edge of the roundel needs to be, roughly halfway between the 2 outermost ribs. That should be a bit easier for me to see. So now I need to pick this whole thing up with the aid of this transfer tape. I should be getting the whole lot. It is a bit awkward Just look as you're peeling it up. Peel it up nice and slowly. If it doesn't come with it at first, as you just saw it didn't, I went in and I pressed it and I've picked up, there we go, the entirety, the 2 parts of the roundel and the outline. I've got all of it. Now I've got to try and position this on the model. That looks like it might work. So I've got some sort of repeatable visual clues. Consistent overlap pretty much along the rear, a bit more than 1 millimetre. The edge of my wing roundel backing is pretty much following. Bear in mind it's a circle in here, so the exact angularity of the backing doesn't really matter, but it's distance wise pretty much on that outer wing rib. And a sort of repeatable sort of measurement along the front here. This is what you're looking for, is these visual cues, because I've got to try and match it on the other side. And this might take but a few goes to get it to lay down and to get it where you're happy with it, and take as many goes as you need. The transfer tape, as you can see, will hold everything in position. When you've got the mask where you want it, you peel it away carefully like so, and this is what we're left with. So now I'm just double checking that I'm happy with the positioning. Of this backing. I've got a similar gap between the rear of the slat and the trailing edge. I'm quite happy with that. It's slightly less far out than it potentially ought to be according to the diagram, but I'm not really concerned by that, frankly. Alright, there we go then. I'm going to call that attached. So the next stage is to remove the centre portions of this mask. You could say, well, why bother fitting them if the first thing you're going to do is remove them? And it's very simple. It's the perfect visual aid to confirm that the backing hasn't been pulled all out of shape. If you try to remove and position this outer part of the mask to the model without the centres in it, you can very easily distort it, pull it out of round and end up with an ellipse and not really notice, because these circles are not in place. The fact that those circles are still in there shows me that my overall mask is still circular. However, we've done that, I've talked about it, so let's get these centres out. And with all of these, what I always do is just use the side of my pointed tweezers and carefully just introduce it to the edge of the mask and then peel it out. Work your way around gently and gradually, because if you try and rip it out quickly again, you're just going to distort this mask terribly, and we will need this again potentially. Well, we will. No potentially about it, we will. So Didn't want to let go, did it? And I'm going to pop that back onto the backing where it came from. And then I'm going to do the same with the central dot. Pop it back into the sheet. Like so. And that's what I need on the model. That will then need to be backed up, obviously, with extra tape around it, but I'm going to fit the other one first because the extra tape will remove these visual alignment clues that I gave myself. Now the fin flash on the sheet, One Man Army Supply, a sort of a blind, this is it. The idea being that that is placed on the model in the correct position, and then you, the modeller, mask around it, much the same way as I've done with the roundels. I'll show you those now. Here are the upper wing. So I've got that mask part in place, and then I've added supplementary masking around it to guard against overspray. The amount of supplementary masking you add is going to be down to personal preference really, what paint you're using, what airbrush you're using, how you spray generally, levels of bravery, etc. So apply as much supplementary masking as you think you need. This is really the only downer with masking and spray markings for me. I think generally speaking, it's actually probably quicker than applying decals, but it's not necessarily quick to apply a lot of markings at the same time because of all this masking and messing around. If I was just applying an underwing roundel, that's all the masking I'll do, but because I'm doing these as well, I'll probably mask this area too. So things like that. It's all stuff that you get used to as you go, and I think on balance, when you take drying times into account, that masking and spraying markings certainly can be quicker than applying decals. Anyhow, that's all of the national markings applied, and the reason I've done all of them is they all require the same set of colours. The yellow's already there because I implemented the outer ring for the yellow when I was applying the undersurface colour. So we need the red, white and blue. Well, white is literally just white, so that's no issue. And the red and blue I have my own mixes for in this case. And here are the colours that I use. So I have roundel red and roundel blue, and then obviously white. It's LP4 flat white. The red is a mixture of XF7 flat red with a little bit of XF64 red brown added to give it that slightly more terracotta-ish hue. And blue is H55 midnight blue, glossy sea blue or some such, Gunsango H55 with a little bit of black in it to dull it down a tad, and that's the colours that I use for World War II British roundels and fin flashes. So the first step then is to get some white in there for the red. The blue does not need a white base coat, but the red very much does. And some of the fuselage roundels, the underwing roundels and the fin flash need a white segment too. So white is the first colour to go in. So next we need to get that white in where it's needed. You can see I've already done this one and indeed the fin flash area. So there's no big secret with this, honestly. You're just spraying it in, but I'm doing it very carefully. Because I don't want to get too much or any white building up around the edge of the mask really, because there's a possibility if I sprayed the whole thing, you know, just blasted white in there wholesale, I'd end up with a little white edge underneath my blue, and I don't want that. That can be avoided of course by spraying a little bit of blue in there first, but it just adds yet another process and slows things down. So simply just blow that white in where it's required. You can opt to sort of give yourself a free shading effect here if you choose to. I satisfy myself with a sort of a slightly mottly finish rather than a thick solid coat of white, and that's where we end up with that. And I repeat that for all of the roundels. Now of course there's a slight difference with the fuselage and underwing roundels insofar as they require a white ring. So I do need a solid coat of white in these. But I still don't want to go too nuts and end it with the potential for the sort of halo under the blue. So I try to angle the way I spray the white in to minimise any build up on the edge of the mask basically. Just a much larger area of white going in here. And if you're not sure about dimensions, just refer back to the pieces that we're going back in, have a look at the size, the thickness of that ring, and just satisfy yourself that you've allowed enough space to have that white where it's needed. Now the sequence you take next is it's really up to the modeller which way around they go on this. I'm going to show you the way I habitually do it, but I don't have any real justification for doing it in this order other than that's just the way I do it. With the two colour roundels such as we have on the top wing, simply going to paint the red next. With the other roundels and indeed the fin flash, because we've got the white ring, that needs to be masked next. So the way so we have to basically work our way back through the rings. So the rings that were placed back on the mask sheet now come into use. And you have to start with the biggest one to centralise everything so you know where they need to go. If you wanted to, you could put this back in before you even put the white in, so you only have the white where you need it. And you're going to carefully just pop that back in where it came from, like that. That will then give the perfect alignment for our white ring. Take this one back out. Knock the model off the paint pots that it's resting on. Okay. Put that back on the sheet again. Now, the ring that is remaining white is masked off and the red one can be popped in. Show that again. So, take the large ring, just cajole it back into position. Thus, I haven't quite got that right. Not exactly, it is close enough to be fair, but there we go, that's better. That's in position. Then take the middle one again, the one that needs to actually be white, and then use that to align get that into position, and then take the big one back out again, like so. Just gently burnish it down. There's no need to press it very heavily. Just burnish it enough so the paint doesn't leach underneath it. The fin flashers, very similar game. So we have the vertical bars here on the sheet, and they're all three separate. So you're simply going to take one and put it in. Doesn't matter if it goes in the front or the rear. It's just being used to give the position for that central strip, which does need to remain white. And then it can come back out again, like so. I'm going to move that down slightly because it doesn't look quite off the bottom. Okay, it's better. There. And with the red in the airbrush, same deal. I'm just going to spray it in enough of the area for what I need. So, and on the other parts I have a masked out area that needs to be painted, so that's even easier. And then the masked out red spots on the fuselage and the lower wing. Let me see, yes. Now the red's in, we're going to do the same process again with these large upper wing roundels to place the red dots, you guessed it, back over our red paint. So take your big circle. Has to be said, these smaller roundels are a lot easier to do this with. Lining them up is much easier. But it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be close enough for the eye not to think that the roundel is skew-if. And then introduce the dot back into the centre there. There it is. And we can pull this out again. And this is where you'll be able to see whether you did enough red paint or not. There you go. Give it a light rub down. Same on this side. At this point, these large rings are no longer required. But if you're careful enough, you can reuse these masks a couple of times. I never do, but it's certainly possible. So that's the upper wing ready then for the blue. Same process as you'd imagine on these, but it's a bit easier because we already know where that red spot needs to go, but there is an extra bit on these that needs to be mentioned. In fact, in all honesty, you don't have to use the spot. A little square of tape would suffice. Put the spot back in, same on the fuselage piece. Now the problem is, if you leave it like this, the blue, when we spray it on, can introduce itself. There's a very, very slight gap between the parts of these masks. And if you cut the masks yourselves with a compass cutter, there will be a hole right in the centre where the compass was. So it's necessary to cover up that circumference, which is why I say, actually, in all honesty, a supplementary square of tape would have sufficed. Can we use these here? So we've got a load of all these extra circles that have been supplied. Now I did check with these, and because I wondered if they were actually a very slightly bigger cut, but they aren't. They're the same size, but we can just grab that and put it over the whole thing if we want. Could, I should say. What I'm going to do is mix and match. So I'm going to use these spots, which are the same as the inner diameter there, here. Pop that over the top. Like so. And that will waterproof that one. And on this one, so these are 31. I'm going to use the ones for it, the larger ones, to cover over this one, like so. You could, as I say, use a little square of tape, or cut your own circles with a compass cutter, but since these are already on this set, I'm just going to use them. That's those. The fin flash needs the same thing. So we've still already got the white covered up, and by far the simplest thing to do here is just a little strip of Tamiya tape. Just de-tack it a bit. And pop that to cover over the red completely, like so. And now we're ready for the final colour, the blue. Now for the fun bit. Is there anything more satisfying in modelling than demasking things like this? Not many things, I don't think. Let's start with the fin flash. So I've taken the supplementary masking off because that's just tedious to watch. A lot of times I just throw this in the bin. But because I have further markings to add to this model, I have actually stuck a lot of that to the side of the bench here to be reused in other places. There we go. Moment of truth. Ta-da! I'm not even on camera. Okay, fine. There we go. Bin flush. That's a fantastic start. Next up we'll do the big oval wing roundels. As I said earlier, you can, if you're careful, reuse these things. And the care really is in taking it off now and trying ultimately not to stretch it out of shape too much. But as I also said, I very rarely, pretty much never do. So that's that bit off. Now, the side of the pointed tweezers. Just annoy the edge of the mask, pushing against that raised lip of the edge of the mask basically, until it pops up enough for you to grab it. And off it comes. Now I don't know if you noticed whilst I was spraying, I know I did speed it up, but the blue is by far the heaviest. Of all the paints I applied, that was by far the heaviest application, and there's still no suggestion of any creep under that mask. And that is because I make sure I'm using relatively low pressure. The paint's actually relatively thick considering what I'm doing, and I make sure when I'm spraying to keep the airbrush for the most part in the sort of perpendicular to away, directionally speaking, to the edge of the mask. If you spray heavily with heavily thinned paint in very wet coats, and particularly if you're not careful about spraying directly in at the edge of the mask or the tape, the chances of getting creep go up dramatically. In fact, it's almost inevitable, especially where you mask over and across panel lines and things like that. There we go, there's two wing roundels. And the tricky one, the fuselage roundels, quite small. Smaller ones are a little bit trickier. Easier to line up the pieces, but grab that and then the dot, and there you go, there you have it. It comes alive. Same again over this side. Now this piece I've just pulled off has been on and off the model about 5 times now, which shows, as I say, with care you can reuse these things multiple times. Centre and the red dot. Cracking. And finally then, the underwing roundels. And there we have it, a full set, painted on, duo and tricolour national markings for this lovely tiger moth. They've come out really, really nice and absolutely look the part. They will blend in a little bit, obviously, because I have used a gloss paint for the base of this roundel colour. So it's dry now, well, I wouldn't hold on to it, but it obviously the finish is considerably different from the rest of the wing, but the flat coat will even that out just fine. So next up we'll look at doing cereals, and again I like to use the mask in the same way as I've shown you with the national markings, i.e. putting that colour onto the top of the finish rather than the other way around. So you need to prepare the mask a little bit to do that. This one already is prepared, and I'll show you now the steps that I took to do that. So the first thing you need to do is what is called weeding. So you need to take out the elements of the mask that you don't require for it to be used in this way, and that is carried out simply by removing. So the area that I want to paint, I remove the mask from. You can keep these elsewhere, they may come in useful at some point or not. All of those get taken away. If there's no spare space on the actual mask sheet to put bits like this, you can use pieces of shiny type cord or plastic even to keep them if you need to keep them. Okay, so that is now weeded, ready for use, and the next thing you need to do is apply transfer tape. You could maybe just about with something this size potentially get away with applying it like this, but things like these areas of the N, these areas of the 9s and 6s get very, very floppy, flap around, stick to themselves, stick to each other, stick to everything really except what you want them to. So it's best to use a transfer tape. So I have here some pieces. This is just 10mm tape, cut roughly, hopefully to about the right length. Poof, just apply that to the top of the mask and rub it down fairly firmly, like so. And that is there to hold everything together, hold everything in place, so that this mask can be transferred to the model in its entirety. So I get hold of the model now. And as before, utilise your instructions and try to find landmarks really on the model to help position this mask where it needs to be. It is really and truly, with especially using these type of masks made out of tape, it's the hardest part of using masks, honestly, is positioning them. You can see here how I've managed to pick that all up in one piece. The centres of the letters are all held in place by this blue tape. Nice. So I've got to try and line that up. As I say, try to find some landmarks, figure it out. I'm thinking it needs to be kind of halfway chord-wise, and the end needs to start roughly around about where my aileron control is. Now, one thing that Sven makes regular comment on in the instructions for these masks is the use of a neutralised corner or a non-sticky area. And to do that, if you want to do it, it can help with the tweezers, because obviously they will stick to this a bit. Use a little piece of tape and stick it into the back here, the other way up, and then you've got a non-sticky corner that you can use to handle the mask with. Another thing you can do, which can be useful, if the positioning of the mask is really critical, you can use measurements and markings and what have you to make alignment guides on the model. I'm not going to bother, because on this occasion it isn't terrifically important to me that this is precisely in the right place. So I can see where my end begins. I'm going to line that up roughly with this surface detail here, and I'm going to visually line the mask up mid-chord like that. And I'm hoping that I've managed to get it. Yes, that will do nicely actually. Fairly parallel. Lay it down. Just give it a light burnish at this stage. Being brutally honest, even now, if this has to come away from the model completely, it is going to be a pain, honestly. Now, transfer tape. If you try to remove the transfer tape when the mask is still on the backing sheet, you will find that the mask would rather stay stuck to the tape than the backing sheet, and that's because the backing sheet is designed to allow the tape to release. Now, however, it's quite happy to stay stuck to the model, and that's one of my transfer tapes removed successfully. Pulling it back, really laid back on itself like this, does help it release. If you pull it up, it will be more likely to try and bring the mask with it. Just be gentle, patient. Slow and steady wins the race, as they say. There we go, both the transfer tapes are off. Now give it a look over and make sure that the mask is down on the surface properly, and there we go, that is applied. Supplementary masking will be put around it, and then I can spray back in black straight into there. I need to apply the other one, remembering it needs to be the other way up, and away we go. So I think the special thing about these mask sets isn't really so much all of this. This has been available before from other manufacturers and quite competently done in most cases. The difference is over here, the stencil markings. So previously in kits we've had, so where we've had stencils before in kits, they've always been decals. There was a little phase a while back where dry rub stencils started to appear. I personally think that's a great idea, but it didn't seem to catch hold because they don't seem to be available anymore. But this is stencils in their true form, actually, just like real ones, except tiny. And they are absolutely remarkable. I'm going to come right up and hopefully it will focus. You can see all of these are absolutely legible. And not only are they legible, but they are cut in the manner of stencils. You do not need to use transfer tape to apply these. It's probably all but impossible to see, but the little joints are there as they are in stenciled writing. And here, if I show you on this, I have already done a couple just to test it out. That is what you will get. It's a game changer for me, frankly, and unfortunately it's a little bit like Master and their brass pitos and gun barrels. This is going to become something that I have to have on a build wherever possible going forward, because that result is just far and away more realistic, more convincing than any decal ever could be. It's fabulous. And to achieve it is extraordinarily simple. So let's look at the underside. That's here. This is the underside, and we need 9, 10 and 6 on the underside. So remember, no transfer tape required. Number 9, here it is. Just gently remove it from the sheet, and you can see that the 9 is cut into the piece of tape, so it's not even like you're going to lose track of which is which once they're off the actual backing paper. That one goes on here, this way up, somewhere around about here. Positioning of stencils doesn't need to be set in stone as such. They are in a general specific position, but it is only, you know, it's not specifically between bays 2 and 3 of the ribs or anything silly like that. They're just generally in that position. Number 10. That's 19, not 10. Silly. Okay, here we go. Number 10. Go, and number 6 over here. So there they are in position with a little bit of supplementary masking around them. Again, the amount of extra masking you use will completely depend on the airbrush you're using and the way you spray. I'm just using my Revolution. I've got XF85 Tamiya in here, the same as I used for all the cereals. But the way you spray it is a little bit different because these are such tiny apertures in this mask. For you to get the paint in there, you need to spray it at a fairly low pressure, quite thin paint, but at a low pressure, and keep going at it. You really mustn't flood the paint on because it will get under the mask. So you see, I'm just kind of wafting it in there really. Generally in a pretty much perpendicular manner. And then the supplementary masking comes off. I'm sticking this back down onto the bench because, as you can see from the state of the tape, I'm just reusing it over and over again. Okay. And we take our stencil very, very gently . From my model, and there's our tiny but beautifully painted stencil. It's absolutely great, and if you are careful enough taking it away from the sheet, you can use these again. Bear in mind though that these are fairly specific, although they don't look like they are. They are in terms of what the stencils actually say. But I do have other tiger moth models to make, so I'll keep hold of them. Now, applying multiple stencils at once like I have done here makes a lot of sense, really, in every way, but actually when it comes down to it, it made these two in particular, masking around them was much more difficult, and actually it would have been quicker to do them individually, but for the purpose of the demonstration that's just fine. And let's just inch that off. Stunning. I don't think you're going to get more than probably 2 uses out of these, because the bridging, the piece, you know, the bits of the tape that bridge each letter are so tiny that they're not going to take. In fact, there we go, perfect. Right, so this one has done what I actually wanted to talk about next, so now I can show you, which is much easier. It mentions in the instructions about black dots. So looking at the stencil on the elevator there, you can see a very prominent black dot. What that actually is where the central part of that number is still on there, the mask. If I just grab hold, it's the centre pieces of this number 8 have remained on the model. So I've just tweaked them away with my tweezers and I have a perfect stencil. So there you go. If you do see little black dots, that's probably what it is, but you need to be very, very gentle because the paint film thickness here is minuscule. and if you go at it too hard with tweezers or even tape, probably you're liable to remove this paint, and clearly getting a mask back on there to repair that will be effectively impossible. So there you go, quite simple to use with a little bit of care, I think. And here we are then, the fruits of my stenciling labours. All in all, it did take quite a long time, and yeah, it probably took a bit longer for the actual application than using decals would have, but there is then no drying time and there's no actual necessity for more operations afterwards to mitigate the decals. So normally I would put these decals on and then I'd probably put another gloss coat on, and then it would need a flat coat, and so on and so on. So overall, looked at as an entire process, it's certainly quicker, but regardless of that, the result is just, it's outstanding in my opinion. You can see those of you who are regular viewers will be well aware of my distaste for stencils. Apart from being really tedious to apply a lot of stencil decals, my main objection to them really is that most of the time, especially in smaller scales, I feel that they detract from the finish to a greater extent than they add to it. So for sure, having stencil details, it adds to the sort of complexity of the finish on your model and makes it look more like a scale miniature and less toy-like, for want of a better way of putting it. But I feel that more often than not, even in larger scales like this, stencil decals are too pronounced. They're too pronounced in and of themselves, and then you have the carrier film and the sort of the visible contour of the decal, all of which detracts from the effect that stencil adds. So I think overall it's a net negative most of the time for most stencils, and that's why I don't really use them. These, on the other hand, they're the exact opposite. They really are. They're so subtle. I've used black, but they're so subtle that from any real distance you can't see them, which is exactly like they are on the real thing. And even where they're very obvious, like on this yellow, because there's no carrier film, they just sink into the overall finish so much more readily. I'm absolutely sold, and this is now going to be an expense on every model. I can see this where possible, just like master turned brass barrels and pitos are already. Here's the rest of this. So the serials, fuselage side serials that previously wouldn't have fit, the big 36. This was complicated somewhat by the presence of this vent, but you just cut the mask so that it can fit around it and then spray it as normal. Underwing serials, and the other side. Now I had a couple of issues with these 36s which were completely my own fault. If I bring that close, it may still be somewhat visible, it may not, but the 6, along the top edge of the 6, I had a few bits, I had a sort of a slightly ragged edge basically when I took the mask off. Part of that is because I wasn't super careful when I pulled the mask off, but it was basically because I didn't spray it wetly enough. That's bad English, I know. I had the paint a little bit too thick, the mixer was a little bit too thick, so the spray that went in there was probably a tad too dry, it wasn't stuck well enough, and consequently when I removed the mask it pulled a little bit of the colour away too. And I have just touched that in. I've used this, and I'm going to get more of these because they're absolutely superb for this sort of thing, because they brush so nicely. Just little dots on a tiny brush. This one, what's this, a 5-0, just tickled that into that edge, did the same over here, just a couple of little bits, and then you can do the opposite, use the green colour, which I did, any tiny bits of really light overspray, almost unnoticeable honestly, but around these fittings, and there was a little bit down here, just touched it back in with green. all good. So the only decal then on this model is this, which I think I've managed to put on off centre, but it will have to do. That's come straight off the decal sheet and it's gone straight on to that green as applied. I did not use a gloss coat to integrate the decal. I don't mind the textural addition here because I think these are a sort of a doped on gas detection patch or something, and yeah, should look raised anyway. And the only other thing worthy of note, the no step decals there on the sort of walkway area. I think it's correct that it should be black throughout, so a black no step wouldn't have been visible, so I put a white one on. And that is a perfect example of a stencil that previously would have been ignored by me. I wouldn't have done it at all, but I actually went out of my way to add it in white because I'm so impressed with how these look. Absolutely love it. So I am now going to put VMS satin varnish on the whole model. This is going to tie all of the finish together. It's going to drop the gloss level just a touch. It should end up roughly about this finish actually. And I'm going to do the whole thing, and that really is just to sort of blend in those slightly glossier roundels and whatnot, and to give me a finish that I can safely put a little bit of wash on here and there. So that's the next step. I will be doing it off camera, and then the model has got to dry. So I'm going to end episode 5 here. And unfortunately, my compressed schedule at this point is going to have a knock-on effect on the videos quality-wise, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry about that. There will be one more episode after this, and it will cover putting the rest of the model together and then a little bit of rigging, and that will finish the series. So it's become a little bit compressed at this end, because I've simply run out of time. Today it's Monday. What is the date today? It's Monday the 22nd now, and I basically have to have this model finished tomorrow because Christmas Eve is Christmas Day in my house this year. So that's the plan going forward. VMS coming next, and then you'll get the rest of the build in the final episode, which will follow this one. So thank you very much for watching, for enduring my waffle about stencils, and special thanks as ever to all of my YouTube channel members and my members and supporters on buymeacoffee.com. And with all of that said, I think it only remains to say until next time and the final festive snack, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.